Welcome. This is Elizabeth Creamer. I come to you today to talk about writing and publishing a methodological article, mostly in the context of mixed methods, but also in the context of qualitative research. This YouTube builds on an earlier YouTube that I did on a similar topic, but is more expansive. If my name is at all familiar to you, it's probably in the context of mixed methods research. I taught research methods as a faculty member in both qualitative and mixed methods research, and late in my career, I got into writing textbooks. I wish I'd done it earlier. My first one you can see at the center was a large-scale, broad topic, an introduction to fully integrated mixed methods research. My most recent one is a narrow one, framing a qual-friendly mixed methods approach, and that is advancing grounded theory with mixed methods. Most recently, I've gotten into the idea of introducing visual displays particularly to the qualitative arena, and in pairing that with mixed methods. So my most recent book is called Leveraging Visual Displays in Mixed Methods Research. I'm still working on that one. Part of my motivation for doing this YouTube comes from a role that I accepted 3 or 4 years ago to be the journal editor of the mixed methods section of a new Elsevier journal called Methods in Psychology. My motivation was primarily to promote mixed methods in research by psychologists and people in psychological fields. But in the process, I've learned that a lot of people conflate or assume that a methodological article is the same as an empirical article. An empirical article reports on the results of a study. Those are very familiar to most people. Methodological articles are a little less familiar. We are among the journals that do a desk review first. I know the Journal of Mixed Methods Research does this as well. The desk review means that the editor looks at it first before sending it out to review. And in both our case and what I understand with the Journal of Mixed Methods, most often what gets rejected at this level is articles that are strictly empirical, reporting on the results of a study. There are 4 things that I want to address in this YouTube. First is I want to underscore the distinction that we in a methodological journal make between empirical and methodological articles, and how the purposes and audiences of those differ. Secondly, I want to show you some options for writing methodological articles and some journals, and list some journals that publish methodological articles. Third, I want to give you some hints about how it affects the organizational structure of an article when its focus is methodological. And finally, I'll recognize some of the challenges in writing a methodological article. The 2 different types of articles, a methodological article and an empirical article, have different purposes and address different audiences. So the empirical article is the one you're most familiar with. That's the format that we all use. Has standardized sections. It's the same format in qualitative, quantitative, and mixed methods articles. Those are our bread and butters as academics. Those are articles where we describe the study, then we report on the findings. The audience for those tend to be narrower than those for a methodological article, in that the audience is usually from a discipline or field or content area where people are interested in the subject of the article, the constructs considered, the theoretical frameworks used. The purpose of those are content specific. The purpose of a methodological article is method or tool or procedure focused. It's to explain generally how you or others used a specific method, procedure, or tool. The audience for a methodological article is wider. These tend to have a more impact. They tend to get a bigger readership. They tend to have a cross-disciplinary readership among those who would like to learn more about the method. You could think about the differences between the two types of articles as a difference between what is in the foreground and what is in the background. So in an empirical article, there is a methodological component, but the reference list, for example, is mainly about the content, the constructs, or the theoretical framework. The methods are in the background. The reverse is true of a methodological article. In a methodological article, the method is front and center. The method is what you see mentioned in the title, the keywords, the abstract. The literature review deals with the method. So one is in the background. In one example, one is in the foreground. This slide lists a number of journals, all of whom are methodologically oriented, some which are defined by a disciplinary context, and some which are open to submissions that relate to a broad variety of disciplines. So Methods in Psychology wants discussion of the application of the research method to psychological fields, but they do not necessarily have to be written by someone who has credentials in psychology. The same applies to qualitative health research, nursing inquiry. These are all discipline-specific journals that they want the content of the discipline to be reflected in the article and in the reference list, by the way. The ones on the right are more inclusive of a broad range of disciplines. It's really wise for authors and would-be authors to identify the target journal before even beginning to write. The most important thing in doing this is to do homework about the journal and the priorities of the journal. Those are expressed in their aims or scope statement. You usually will find that under the About tab, and those will give you details and specifications about the types of articles that are within and without its scope. Usually in a methodological journal, they will specify the preferences quantitative articles, the preferences qualitative articles, or mixed methods article, or they accept any kind of methodology. This is your first stop in developing a methodological article that could be accepted for publication. Let's talk about some of the potential benefits of a methodological article. One, of course, is to improve the ability to generate multiple publications from a research project that are not duplicative. A second is that to enhance the visibility and impact of your own work by publishing in different types of venues. The final one, I'd say, some people think this is not a good use, is that there's certainly plenty of strong examples of methodological articles that are produced to explain, for example, why a hypothesis is not proven, or to explain why something did not prove to be as effective as expected. This table summarizes some options for designing a mixed method dissertation with the idea of producing multiple publications. The first one is the one that's talked about most often, though not without some controversy, and that's the idea of splitting it out into a publication, an empirical publication, a quant empirical publication, and then a mixed methods, either empirical publication or a methodological publication. Other options to produce multiple publications is to have the first publication about a literature review, for example. The second one could be about developing a theoretical framework or instrument, and the third one could be the empirical publication. A student of mine, Allison Bowers, and I have a site here, did just that in producing a grounded theory model from the literature, which she then applied in a systematic review. There's a whole body of examples of mixed method research that either uses a systematic review or a content analysis, where the data that's being analyzed are publications. This is an example of one that Tim Guterman took the lead on. It was a systematic review of mixed method publications and their use of joint displays. I tend to lean towards something more likely to be called a content analysis. These can be qualitative in their description of mixed methods articles. There's a very frequent approach in chapters, for example, about mixed methods, to pull examples of certain strategies or approaches or procedures, and then to examine similarities and differences between ways they are used. This is one more example of a methodological article that was published in Methods of Psychology. In this example, an author from Teacher Education discussed digital timelining as a research procedure. In a way, the procedure illustrates how you can integrate many different sources of data, create an interactive type database to track changes or transitions over time. This may be the most important slide in this slide deck, in that it suggests different ways that you would shift the organizational structure of an article to reflect its methodological aim. Really what it's saying is the methodological aim weaves through every single part of the article, from its abstract to its title to its key words to the way the literature review is organized, etc., to the way the reference list is formatted. So, for example, just pulling out one part of this table, the literature review, for example, is organized around the method in a methodological article rather than the construct or the theory. Let's talk about just two challenges in writing and publishing a methodological article. The first one is that it requires a certain degree of expertise in that method. That's a higher degree of expertise that you're going to get from the average research methods course. It could be about a case study, it could be a grounded theory, requires some additional reading and expanding the scope of your reading. The second, even bigger challenge, I think, is in the writing of these publications in a way to allow them to reach a broad audience. So we all develop jargon related to methods, methodologies, and disciplines. Many people will be unfamiliar with those, and some find them very off-putting. So technical language can really, really limit the readership of your article. So as we wrap up, let me just summarize several tips for writing and publishing a methodological article. The first, of course, is to do some homework about the journal, about the aims and scope of the journal, their guidelines for publishing. The second I just referred to is to try to write with a large audience in mind, a generic audience. That means, among other things, that you're very deliberate about defining your terms. Another recommendation is to watch for calls for special issues with methodological focus. It seems like there's more and more of these every day. Second to last, I'd say, after you've done your homework in a journal, send a query to the editor. Most editors will respond and help clarify what it is that they are accepting. Finally, I'd suggest, if you've narrowed down to the journal or to the special issue, do a little homework about the publications of the editor to get a sense of his or her priorities. I hope there's some elements or all elements of this YouTube that's been helpful to you. So on this last slide, I'm just listing a number of ways that you can contact or join me in different platforms. Feel free to send me email if you have some questions or clarification items about this YouTube.